This is TWiT.
All right, T groups, also known as training groups. This is a terminology that's new to me before I read this article, anyways. But apparently, it's not a new concept. It's been around since the 1940s when it was first developed, and also, Stanford's MBA program actually integrates T groups in a very essential program inside of the MBA program. And in many ways, it focuses not on how to train someone about how to do something, but rather how to recognize how they feel about what they're doing, kind of their emotional experience that's tied to what they do. And startup leaders in Silicon Valley apparently are turning to T groups to better improve how they show up in their roles, how they can be more effective leaders, in other words. And joining us to talk about this is Allison Levitsky, who wrote all about T groups in Silicon Valley for Protocol. Welcome to the show, Allison.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. This is I love this topic, and I'm so happy that we could get you on to talk about it because you did a really good, thorough walkthrough on what these T groups actually are. But I think kind of part of the headline of this article around bringing empathy to Silicon Valley really resonated for me because we're so used to talking about technology and about the leaders like Mark Zuckerberg, not to name someone specifically, but hey, he's the easy target, as like these like robots that roam around and just make decisions without any sort of care or concern about who it affects and how and the empathy behind it. So I think that's kind of what really resonates here, at least with me. Let's start with the T group at its core. What exactly is a T group? What makes it essential or effective when it's compared to other methodologies?
Yeah, so as you said, T groups have been around since the 40s, and they kind of had their heyday in the 1960s, but they've been a really popular elective at Stanford Business School for decades now. I think 85% of students participate in a T group. And what a T group can be 8 participants, a dozen participants, often it's around 12, who don't know each other. And there are a couple facilitators, and they basically sit in a circle and they are told to focus on the here and now. And what that means is only talk about things that are happening right here, right now. And that's basically your emotional experience and how you are responding to other people in the room. So someone says something and everyone else is encouraged to share candidly how they feel about what that person just said. And this is sort of a level of feedback that most of us aren't used to in a typical business meeting or really any other social situation. And I think it's really resonating with entrepreneurs in tech because they want to know how other people are responding to them. They want to know how they're showing up in meetings, how their colleagues see them, how to be more influential.
Yeah, and you illustrate that really well with some of the kind of the examples that you use in your article where a leader might say, I really thought that by being open and engaging with my employees that I was inviting them in. But in essence, I was cutting them off. I was giving them only one path forward into how they communicate with me. And because they don't necessarily, that's not their natural place to take within this relationship, this interpersonal relationship, it ends up shutting them down. It has the opposite effect. And this is kind of an opportunity for leaders to kind of lower their defenses. I think what came to mind when I was reading through this, and I only have my own personal work to really compare it against, is that it helps people get out of their own way, in other words.
Yeah, because none of us really know how other people are reacting to the way we behave until they share it with us. And usually people are too afraid to tell us exactly how we're coming off. So I think that's what T groups offer, is this sort of intensive weekend where they just constantly hear how people are responding to them emotionally.
Yeah, I think what comes to mind for me right now is it's one thing to be in a group like this, like a T group. Like I'm a startup founder and I decide I'm going to go to this T group, this workshop, whatever you want to call it, this retreat, to focus on how, my emotional response to how I lead this company. And I'm going to be with other leaders and we're all there for the same reason. there might be some like that makes it easier potentially to know that they're not there with the people that they lead actually lead in their company. How are some of these qualities then taken from that group itself, which in some ways feels kind of like a safe space, right? And take those qualities and then bring it into the leadership environment where, hey, I'm encouraging my employees to do the same. Like, is there a disconnect, or that's the ultimate goal?
I don't think that T group facilitators would say that the idea is to have employees give the level of feedback that you would give in a T group, because I think that would be a little extreme. What I learned is that in T group there are different levels of vulnerability, and you start with hi, my name is blank, I work at blank, and you have to build up, and I think most of us know this. So it's all about knowing how to toggle that level of vulnerability. You don't want to come in and just be fully vulnerable. I talked with one exec who said that after his first T group years ago, his first staff meeting after T group, he was feeling so raw after the experience that he came in and he was like crying in a meeting, and he made one of his employees cry, and it was just this weird kumbaya thing. And he got feedback afterward that it was a little much, and so he kind of learned after that he needed to slow down with the level of vulnerability at work.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it could potentially be very uncomfortable for someone, to see their boss in this, and especially their boss who may not normally be, a very vulnerable person, suddenly be that. And how do I, as an employee, what is my role in that regard? Is that just a little bit too much for me at that point? What is it about startup culture that kind of is an enabler of leaders who aren't practicing empathy in what they do? I mean, because again, it kind of goes back to what I kind of set up with, Mark Zuckerberg being the robot leader. Like that's an image that I think we're very used to seeing in leaders of technology companies. Why? Why is that?
I think that's a popular caricature. I don't know how accurate it is.
True, very true.
I think there are, I think entrepreneurs in tech may have a technical background, and so they're not as used to talking about their feelings. I think one thing I heard from T Group alumni was that, in learning how to run a business, whether they went to business school or not, they just hadn't really been exposed to this type of emotional education. They hadn't really, it's not really something that we learn in school, and it's not something that most business schools are teaching. So I think it's just not really a part of our business culture, and probably, less so in tech.
Yeah, indeed. You're right. It's not really taught that frequently, except for apparently Stanford, which makes it, at least to some degree, a required course. Maybe we need to see a little bit more than that. There are other trends in Silicon Valley. I've heard a lot of people over the past number of years talking about microdosing and things like that to get more creative or get more effective, that sort of stuff. How does something like this compare to other kinds of methods like microdosing, or like these retreats that business leaders can go to? I mean, they're all a little bit different. Like, how does this compare if you had to summarize it?
I don't know if there's a comparison. I would say that I think that tech entrepreneurs they have an innovator mindset. They have an optimizer mindset. They want to find, new and interesting ways to improve themselves and improve their companies. And so I don't know if there's a strong through line between microdosing and T Group, because other than they're just both ways that some people in Silicon Valley have tried to kind of see the world differently, I guess, or behave differently at work.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to compare the two, I suppose. They're always looking for a way to kind of catch an edge, see the world differently, like you said, and with different effects. And it turns out exploring what's already inside of us, could so in many ways be the most effective method. What are some of the realizations that some of the folks that you kind of tracked for your piece realized in the T group environment? Like, can you give like an example of like a realization of how someone thought they were one way but were another?
Yeah, I talked to one guy who actually is now involved in. He's now helping to run an organization that hosts T groups. He'd been feeling burnt out at the nonprofit that he'd founded almost a decade before, and but he felt so guilty about the idea of stepping down, even though I think on some level he knew he needed to, and it would be better for the organization if he did. And he said that participating in his first T group kind of brought him to that realization that the story he was telling himself about why he was still there was that he was a bad person, and that by doing that work, it was making him a good person. And I think realizing that story helped him realize it was time to step down. I talked to another startup founder who said his T group experience showed him how conflict averse he is, and that his tendency in groups is to sort of calm people down. And he realized that for that reason, he needed to hire a head of people for his company, because he needed someone who could balance him out in that way and be more decisive and less afraid of upsetting people.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense, right? Like if you're conflict averse, anytime disagreement comes up, your initial reaction is going to be to calm things down, to smooth things out, and make sure that everybody's okay. When in reality, sometimes when you're running a business, actually a little bit of conflict could be a healthy thing. It could get you to the next breakthrough. It doesn't necessarily mean bad. It just means that there's maybe a disagreement that can be worked through and find something that works for everyone. So that makes a whole lot of sense. How exactly can leaders get involved with something like a T group? Like, is it one organization that's putting on the T groups, or are there many different organizations leading these T groups now? And and how much are people looking at if they want to participate in something like this?
Mm-hmm. There are a couple prominent ones in Silicon Valley. There's Leaders in Tech, which is a nonprofit, and they host T group weekends for a little over $6,200 for the weekend. And then they have a year-long fellowship program, which is more. There's another popular facilitator named Anna Maria Nino Murcia, who I talked to for the story, and she also hosts T groups throughout the year. So there are a couple ways to get involved.
Right on. Well, I love the topic of your piece. I love that this is happening, because I think, in general, more empathy is good in this world. So any way that we can facilitate that and grow that thought and that feeling, that's good news for me. So Allison Levitsky, really appreciate you taking time. Of course, you write for Protocol. That's protocol.com. If people want to find you online, where can they find you?
My Twitter is Levitsky with 3 Y's at the end. And my email is alevitsky@protocol.com if you want to talk about a story.
Oh, right on. Nice. Thank you, Allison. Happy New Year. And thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.